You have committed murder. Therefore, this court sentences you to death.
I am not guilty.
Black Marine gets death penalty. Then his loyal Beagle uncovers the shocking truth. The gavel crashed down as Judge Harmon pronounced, "Sergeant Marcus Johnson, this court sentences you to death." In the stunned silence that followed, only a small Beagle's whimper could be heard from the gallery. No one could have predicted that this decorated Marine service dog would uncover evidence of a conspiracy reaching into the highest echelons of military command. Naval Base Coronado stood as a monument to military precision, immaculate grounds personnel moving with purpose, and the constant rhythm of training exercises echoing across the compound. In stark contrast was the base's detention facility, where Sergeant Marcus Johnson now resided in solitary confinement. His cell contained only a narrow bed, a steel toilet, and a small desk, where he meticulously maintained a journal documenting his case. The only personal touch was a worn photograph of himself in full-dress uniform with his Beagle Scout, who had served alongside him as an explosives detection dog in Afghanistan before becoming his PTSD service animal. At 34, Marcus Johnson embodied the Marine Corps values of honor, courage, and commitment. The son of a Detroit factory worker and a nurse, he had enlisted at 18, rising through the ranks through sheer determination and exceptional leadership. His 15-year career included 3 combat tours and a Silver Star for bravery under fire when he carried 2 wounded comrades to safety despite being injured himself. The disciplined exterior masked deep trauma. During his last deployment, Marcus's unit was ambushed, resulting in the deaths of 4 Marines under his command. The survivor's guilt manifested as severe PTSD, which traditional therapy failed to address until Scout entered his life. The Beagle, initially trained for explosive detection, showed an uncanny ability to sense Marcus's oncoming panic attacks and ground him during flashbacks. Despite his decorated service, Marcus had always felt the weight of being one of few black officers in his unit. He'd navigated the subtle biases and occasional overt racism with stoic professionalism, earning respect through competence rather than confrontation. His commanding officer, Colonel Victor Hayes, had become both mentor and friend, one of the few who seemed to judge Marcus solely on his merits. Now that distinguished career lay in ruins, with Marcus facing execution for allegedly murdering Lieutenant Ryan Shepard, the son of General James Shepard, during what prosecutors claimed was a racially motivated dispute. Lieutenant Shepard's body was discovered in his quarters with multiple stab wounds from a Ka-bar combat knife, the same model found in Marcus's locker with traces of the victim's blood. Security footage showed someone of Marcus's build entering Shepard's building around the time of death. Most damning was an email thread showing heated exchanges between Marcus and Shepard regarding a training exercise where Shepard had allegedly endangered Marcus's team through negligence. The prosecution painted a picture of racial tension and professional jealousy culminating in murder. What they didn't explore was why a methodical, decorated Marine would commit a crime so sloppily, leaving evidence that pointed directly to himself. Military defense attorney Captain Leila Rodriguez received Marcus's case with trepidation. At 29, she had never handled a capital murder trial, but her reputation for thoroughness and unwavering commitment to justice had prompted Marcus to request her specifically. Their first meeting was tense. Marcus sat ramrod straight, answering questions with military precision, but revealing little emotion. "Sergeant Johnson, I need complete honesty if I'm going to help you," Leila said, studying his impassive face. "I didn't kill Shepard," Marcus replied. "We had our differences, but I wouldn't compromise everything I stand for over a disagreement." "Then explain the knife, the blood evidence, the security footage." "Someone is framing me. The knife was stolen from my locker 2 weeks ago. I reported it missing. The security footage only shows someone of my build, not my face. And I was at the base hospital during the estimated time of death, getting Scout's hip checked after he limped during our morning run. Was anyone with you who can confirm this?" "The veterinary technician, but she's been deployed since then. The appointment was in the system, but when my lawyer tried to access it, the records were missing." As Leila prepared to leave, Marcus asked about Scout. "They won't let me see him. He's with my neighbor, but he's trained to alert to my PTSD episodes. He knows commands that could help us." "Help? How exactly?" "Scout can identify scents better than any machine. He found IEDs that technology missed in Afghanistan. He can recognize people by scent even after they've showered and changed clothes. And he was with me the day before Shepard died. He might remember something I don't." Leila hesitated. "Sergeant, with respect, this is a murder trial, not a missing persons case." "Captain, I'm facing lethal injection for something I didn't do." "Scout isn't just a pet. He's a trained military working dog with capabilities that could identify who was actually in my barracks, who took my knife, who had access to plant evidence. Will you at least try?" Looking at the desperate hope in the otherwise stoic Marine's eyes, Leila made her decision. "I'll see what I can do about getting Scout involved in the investigation. But we need to pursue conventional defense strategies too." Leila's request to incorporate a service dog into the investigation met predictable resistance. Her commanding officer called it unprecedented and inappropriate. The prosecution team, led by Major James Wilson, dismissed it as a desperate attempt to humanize a cold-blooded killer. After filing multiple motions and leveraging Marcus's rights under disability accommodation laws, Leila secured limited approval. Scout could be brought to the base for controlled investigative sessions provided military police and prosecution representatives were present. With this small victory, Leila developed a three-pronged strategy. First, establish Marcus's alibi through hospital records and witness testimony. Second, investigate Lieutenant Shepard's background for other potential enemies or motives. Third, use Scout's specialized training to identify scents and potentially track the movements of whoever planted the evidence. Leila enlisted two key allies, Dr. Amara Okafor, a forensic specialist with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, who had privately expressed doubts about the evidence collection procedures, and Master Sergeant Derek Calloway, Marcus's former team leader, who believed unequivocally in his innocence. "Johnson is incapable of this," Calloway insisted during their first meeting. "Not just morally, tactically. If Marcus wanted someone dead, there wouldn't be evidence. He led extraction missions behind enemy lines. He knows how to move without being seen." This insight shifted Leila's perspective. She wasn't just defending an innocent man, she was defending someone who had been deliberately and expertly framed. On a crisp morning, an unusual group assembled outside the barracks where Lieutenant Shepard had been killed. Leila, with Scout, on a specialized military working dog harness, Dr. Okafor, two military police officers, and a representative from the prosecution. Scout's reaction upon entering the base was immediate, his training evident in his alert posture and focused attention. Marcus's neighbor, who had been caring for Scout, had briefed Leila on the specific commands Marcus used. "Scout, seek," Leila commanded, using the detection phrase she'd been told would activate his training. The Beagle began methodically working the area, starting with Marcus's barracks. He showed particular interest in the ventilation system access panel, pawing at it insistently. When one of the MPs opened the panel, they discovered a small digital device. "It's a signal jammer," Dr. Okafor explained after examining it. "This would have disrupted the security cameras in this sector, creating brief glitches in the footage." This discovery supported their theory that the security footage had been tampered with. Scout then led them to the laundry facility, where he alerted strongly to a specific washing machine. Dr. Okafor swabbed the machine and found microscopic traces of blood that had survived the cleaning cycle. "I'll need to run tests to confirm, but this could be where the killer washed their clothes after the murder." Most significantly, when brought to Lieutenant Shepard's quarters, Scout bypassed the obvious blood evidence and focused intently on a particular corner of the room where a small cufflink was discovered lodged between the floorboards, a cufflink bearing the insignia of the elite Shepard Military Academy, which the victim's father, General Shepard, had founded. "The lieutenant wouldn't wear his father's academy cufflinks," Leila noted. "This belonged to someone else who was in this room." As they left the scene, the prosecution representative was noticeably quiet. Their first investigation had yielded 3 new pieces of evidence that the original investigation had missed, all pointing to a more complex scenario than the straightforward case against Marcus. The initial discoveries energized Leila's investigation. The signal jammer proved to be military-grade equipment with a restricted serial number that had been reported missing from the Communications Division 3 months earlier. The blood traces in the washing machine matched Lieutenant Shepard's type, confirming someone had laundered bloody clothes there. Most promising was the cufflink. Only graduates of the prestigious Shepard Military Academy wore that specific insignia, and only a small number were currently stationed at Naval Base Coronado. Leila began compiling a list of potential suspects. Meanwhile, Dr. Okafor re-examined the original forensic evidence. "The blood spatter on the knife doesn't match what we'd expect from the stabbing described in the autopsy," she explained. "It appears the knife was exposed to the blood after death, not during the actual murder." This suggested the murder weapon might not be Marcus's knife at all. His knife could have been planted and contaminated with blood post-mortem. Leila also focused on recovering Marcus's missing alibi. The veterinary technician who had treated Scout was located on deployment in Germany and confirmed via video deposition that Marcus had indeed been at the clinic during the estimated time of death. He was concerned about Scout's hip, the technician testified. "We spent at least 40 minutes examining the dog, discussing treatment options and demonstrating exercises to strengthen the joint. Sergeant Johnson couldn't have been in 2 places at once." When Leila attempted to determine why this appointment had disappeared from records, she encountered a troubling pattern. Several system maintenance events had resulted in selective data loss, all coinciding with evidence that might have exonerated Marcus. As new evidence emerged, Marcus's case began attracting wider attention. Veterans advocacy groups questioned the rush to judgment against a decorated Marine. Civil rights organizations raised concerns about racial bias in military justice. A respected military affairs journalist published an article highlighting the inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. The official response was swift and coordinated. General Shepard gave interviews emphasizing his confidence in the military justice system and expressing his family's desire for closure. Base Commander Colonel Richards issued a statement warning against external interference in an ongoing military judicial process. More concerning to Leila was the pressure applied directly to her chain of command. Her supervising attorney called her in for a meeting. "The general has expressed concerns about your handling of the Johnson case," he said carefully. "There's talk of reassigning it to someone with more experience in capital cases." "That would violate Sergeant Johnson's right to counsel of his choice," Leila countered. "Leila, be reasonable. This case has implications beyond one Marine's fate. General Shepard commands significant resources and influence within the Department of Defense. All the more reason to ensure Johnson gets a proper defense. Sir, with respect, if you remove me from this case, I'll be forced to file an ethics complaint regarding command interference." Her supervisor sighed. "At least consider a plea deal. Life imprisonment instead of the death penalty." Leila left the meeting shaken, but more determined. That evening, she received an anonymous message on her secure military email. "Drop the Shepard Academy angle if you value your career. Some cases aren't meant to be won." Despite the pressure, public interest continued to grow. A group of retired black military officers issued a statement questioning the handling of the case. Veterans with service dogs organized a demonstration outside the base. Most surprisingly, Scout became something of a symbol, the loyal Beagle fighting for justice. As one headline put it, Dr. Okafor's continued forensic analysis yielded the first major breakthrough. After reconstructing the crime scene based on blood spatter patterns, she determined that the killer was left-handed. Marcus was right-handed. The angle and force of the wounds indicate a left-dominant attacker. She explained, showing Leila the 3D reconstruction. Additionally, based on the height and angle, the attacker was approximately 3 inches shorter than Sergeant Johnson. Master Sergeant Calloway's investigation into the Shepard Academy graduates stationed at Coronado produced a short list of potential suspects. Most interesting was Captain Eric Westfield, General Shepard's godson, and a left-handed officer who stood 5'10", exactly 3 inches shorter than Marcus. Westfield and Lieutenant Shepard had a complicated relationship, Calloway reported. They were childhood friends, but there was intense rivalry. Shepard was a natural leader who earned his position. Westfield has always relied on his connection to the general. Leila also discovered that Westfield had been passed over for promotion in favor of Shepard just weeks before the murder. Most damning, Westfield had no alibi for the night of the murder. He claimed to have been alone in his quarters, despite base records showing his key card had accessed the officers' club during that time. When Leila requested Westfield's personnel file, she encountered unexpected resistance. The file was classified under a special security protocol requiring General Shepard's personal authorization, unusual for an officer of Westfield's rank. With the trial date approaching rapidly, Leila assembled her defense strategy. The evidence of forensic inconsistencies, Marcus's confirmed alibi, and the emerging connection to Captain Westfield formed a compelling alternative narrative. Lieutenant Shepard was killed by someone with personal and professional motives, and Marcus, a convenient scapegoat with the added benefit of racial bias, was framed for the murder. However, Leila knew that challenging General Shepard's godson meant facing formidable opposition. The general's influence permeated the military justice system, and Judge Advocate General's Corps officers were not immune to career concerns. Leila prepared for potential retaliation. She secured copies of all evidence with trusted colleagues outside the direct chain of command. She prepared detailed affidavits from Dr. Okafor and Master Sergeant Calloway, stored with instructions to release them if anything happened to derail the case. Most importantly, Leila worked with Marcus to prepare him for testimony. His military training had equipped him to remain composed under pressure, but the months of isolation and the looming death penalty had taken their toll. "They'll try to provoke an emotional response," Leila warned. "They want to see the angry black man stereotype that fits their narrative." "I've been managing that balance my entire career," Marcus replied with resignation. "Assertive enough to lead, but never angry enough to threaten. I know the drill." The night before the trial resumed, Leila received another anonymous message. "Westfield is protected at the highest levels. Evidence will disappear. Witnesses will be deployed. Defense attorneys can have accidents." Instead of intimidating her, the threat confirmed she was on the right track. She immediately contacted a trusted JAG colleague. "If anything happens to me, everything I've discovered goes public. They can threaten me privately, but they can't silence the truth once it's in the open." The morning of the trial, Leila arrived to find chaos. Dr. Okafor had been suddenly reassigned to a classified mission overseas, effective immediately. The forensic evidence they had collected during Scout's investigation had been sealed under a national security directive. Judge Colonel Hamilton had been replaced by Judge Colonel Pearson, known for his close relationship with General Shepard. Inside the courtroom, Leila was immediately approached by a court officer. "Judge wants to see counsel in chambers now." In the judge's chambers, Major Wilson was already waiting, looking smugly confident. Judge Colonel Pearson didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Captain Rodriguez, I've reviewed the case file and find several of your investigative methods questionable at best. The use of a dog to collect evidence falls well outside established protocols. Your Honor Scout is a trained military working dog with documented success in. Furthermore," the judge continued as if she hadn't spoken, "I'm excluding any evidence not collected through official NCIS channels. That includes Dr. Okafor's unofficial analyses and anything discovered during your canine expeditions. Your Honor, with respect that eliminates virtually all of the exculpatory evidence we've discovered." "Perhaps you should have followed proper procedures, Captain." As Leila left chambers, her phone buzzed with a message from Master Sergeant Calloway. "Emergency. Scout missing from my quarters. Break in overnight. Call me." Leila's stomach dropped. Scout wasn't just Marcus's beloved companion, he was now a symbol of the case and potentially their most important witness. His disappearance on the morning of trial couldn't be coincidence. She immediately filed an emergency motion regarding witness tampering and requested a delay in proceedings. Judge Pearson dismissed her concerns with barely concealed contempt. "This court will not delay a capital murder trial over a missing pet." As the trial proceeded, the prosecution systematically presented their case, while Leila watched her defense crumble. Each piece of exculpatory evidence was ruled inadmissible on increasingly tenuous grounds. By day's end, Marcus's chances looked bleaker than ever. Outside the courtroom, Calloway was waiting with news. Security footage from my building shows two men in civilian clothes taking scout. One matches Captain Westfield's build. The trial's second day began with the prosecution's closing arguments, a methodical character assassination painting Marcus as an angry, resentful subordinate who killed Lieutenant Shepard out of racial animus and professional jealousy. When Leila's turn came, she approached the jury with quiet determination. The prosecution has presented a narrative that relies on stereotypes rather than facts. They want you to see Sergeant Johnson as nothing more than his race and rank. But the evidence, what little they've allowed you to see, tells a different story. She methodically highlighted the inconsistencies in the prosecution's case, the time discrepancies, the forensic impossibilities, the convenient disappearance of alibi evidence. Most importantly, she continued, ask yourselves why a decorated Marine with expertise in covert operations would commit murder so sloppily, leaving evidence that points directly to himself. This isn't a case of a perfect crime gone wrong, it's a perfect frame-up. As she prepared to introduce her alternative suspect theory, the courtroom doors burst open. A journalist entered, followed by Calloway, and to everyone's astonishment, Scout, who immediately began barking and straining toward the prosecution table. "Order!" Judge Pearson shouted. "Bailiff, remove that dog immediately." As the bailiff approached, Scout broke free and bolted across the courtroom, not toward Marcus, as everyone expected, but directly to Captain Westfield, who had been sitting in the gallery. The dog circled him, barking insistently, then began pawing at his uniform jacket. Westfield tried to push Scout away, but the dog persisted, grabbing the edge of his jacket with his teeth. Something fell from an inside pocket, a small voice recorder that landed on the courtroom floor. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Westfield, in a moment of panic, reached for his sidearm. "Gun!" someone shouted, and people began diving for cover. A Marine security officer tackled Westfield before he could draw his weapon completely. Scout, still barking furiously, stood protectively between the commotion and Marcus. In the confusion, the journalist managed to grab the voice recorder before it could be secured as evidence. When order was finally restored, Judge Pearson cleared the courtroom of spectators and called an immediate recess. "Counsel in my chambers, now." In chambers, the judge's composure had cracked. "Would someone please explain what just happened in my courtroom?" "Your Honor," Leila began, "Scout recognized Captain Westfield as the person who took him from Master Sergeant Calloway's quarters. The voice recorder that fell from his pocket appears to be evidence he was attempting to remove from the proceedings." "A dog barking proves nothing," Major Wilson scoffed. "Actually," the journalist interjected, having been invited to join the discussion, "I've already listened to part of the recording. It contains a conversation between Captain Westfield and General Shepard discussing how to ensure Sergeant Johnson takes the fall for the lieutenant's murder." Judge Pearson's face drained of color. "Let me hear it." The recording was damning. Westfield could be heard saying, "Johnson's perfect. He had that argument with Ryan. He's isolated. And who's going to believe a black sergeant over the general's word?" General Shepard responded, Make sure the evidence is clean. I want this wrapped up quickly." After listening, Judge Pearson sat in stunned silence before finally speaking. "Major Wilson, I want Captain Westfield detained for questioning immediately, and I want that recording authenticated." She turned to Leila. "Captain Rodriguez, in light of this new evidence, I'm inclined to grant a mistrial. With respect, Your Honor, my client has spent months in solitary confinement for a crime he didn't commit. We don't want a mistrial. We want a dismissal with prejudice and immediate release." The trial was suspended while NCIS launched an investigation into Captain Westfield and the recording. Leila used this time to consolidate her case, working with Calloway to connect all the pieces of the conspiracy. "Westfield is talking," Calloway informed her on the second day. "He's admitted to planting the knife and manipulating the security footage on orders from General Shepard, but claims he didn't commit the actual murder." "He's minimizing his involvement," Leila replied. "We need to find out who actually killed Lieutenant Shepard." They focused on the night of the murder. The journalist who had entered the courtroom with Scout Eliza Washington from the Military Justice Review had been investigating General Shepard's academy for months based on whistleblower allegations of corruption. "Lieutenant Shepard was my source," Washington revealed. "He discovered his father was accepting bribes to influence defense contracts worth billions. The night he died, he was planning to give me documentation proving the general's corruption. This provided the missing motive. Lieutenant Shepard wasn't killed over a personal dispute with Marcus. He was silenced because he was about to expose his own father's crimes." The final piece fell into place when Dr. Okafor, defying her reassignment orders, sent Leila a secure message. "Analyze blood spatter again. 2 attackers present one Westfield's height, one much taller. The lieutenant was held down by one person while the other stabbed him." The night before court reconvened, Leila visited Marcus in detention. He looked better than she'd seen him. Scout had been allowed to visit him twice under supervision. "We have enough to get your case dismissed," she told him. "Westfield's confession, the recording, the motive connecting General Shepard to the murder, it's all coming together." Marcus nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "What happens after the system that was supposed to protect me tried to execute me? How do I trust it again?" "One step at a time," Leila counseled. "First we get you free. And then would I go back to being just another Black Marine walking on eggshells? Lieutenant Shepard died trying to expose corruption. If we just walk away after I'm cleared, his death meant nothing." Leila realized Marcus wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for justice that extended beyond his own case. The system had failed him not just through corruption, but through the implicit biases that made him the perfect scapegoat. "We won't walk away," she promised. "We'll see this through to the end, not just for you, but for every service member who's been judged by anything other than their character and actions." The courtroom was packed when proceedings resumed. National media had picked up the story of corruption, murder, and a loyal service dog exposing the truth. Marines in dress uniforms filled half the gallery, many from Marcus's former units. The other half held civil rights advocates, veterans groups, and military families. Judge Pearson entered looking grave. "Before we continue with the trial, the court must address serious allegations of misconduct. The NCIS investigation has confirmed that Captain Eric Westfield illegally entered Master Sergeant Calloway's quarters and removed the service dog Scout, apparently to interfere with the defense. He has also admitted to planting evidence in Sergeant Johnson's quarters and manipulating security footage. Major Wilson rose. Your Honor, in light of this new information, the prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against Sergeant Marcus Johnson. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Leila stood quickly. Your Honor, the defense objects to a simple dismissal at this time. The judge looked startled. Captain Rodriguez, your client, has spent months in detention for a crime he didn't commit. Why would you object to dismissal? Because dismissal without addressing the larger conspiracy would allow the true perpetrators to escape justice. We request the court hear our evidence regarding who actually murdered Lieutenant Shepard and why. Judge Pearson considered the request. This is highly unusual, Captain. This court has no jurisdiction to conduct a murder investigation. Your Honor, what we're proposing is to present evidence of who actually killed Lieutenant Shepard, evidence that directly relates to why my client was framed. The court has inherent authority to address fraud upon the court. After conferring with both counsel in chambers, Judge Pearson made her ruling. The court will hear the defense's evidence regarding the actual perpetrator of Lieutenant Shepard's murder as it relates to the apparent conspiracy to frame Sergeant Johnson. However, this is not a trial of any new defendants, merely an evidentiary hearing to complete the record. Leila presented her case methodically, the forensic evidence showing two attackers, the motive connecting General Shepard to silencing his whistleblower son, and the recording revealing the conspiracy to frame Marcus. General Shepard, watching from the gallery, maintained his composure even as the evidence mounted. When Leila called him as a witness, he refused to testify, citing his Fifth Amendment rights. The turning point came when Leila called her final witness, Lieutenant Colonel Diana Shepard, the general's ex-wife and Lieutenant Shepard's mother. Colonel Shepard, thank you for your courage in testifying today. Can you tell the court about the conversation you had with your son the night before his murder? Diana Shepard's testimony was devastating. She described how her son had discovered evidence of his father's corruption and planned to expose it. Ryan was torn between family loyalty and his duty as an officer. He ultimately chose integrity over protecting his father. She also revealed that General Shepard had threatened their son. He told Ryan that whistleblowers have short careers and sometimes shorter lives. I begged Ryan to be careful, but he said some things were worth the risk. As Colonel Shepard testified, General Shepard abruptly stood and moved toward the exit. Scout, who had been lying quietly beside Marcus at the defense table, began barking furiously. The bailiff moved to intercept the general, but he shoved the officer aside and ran for the door. He didn't make it 3 steps before Scout launched himself across the courtroom, latching onto the general's leg. As Shepard fell, a small key card slipped from his pocket, the access card to the secure room where the original crime scene evidence was stored. As officers took General Shepard into custody, Judge Pearson addressed the courtroom. In light of the overwhelming evidence of innocence and the apparent criminal conspiracy to frame him, this court dismisses all charges against Sergeant Marcus Johnson with prejudice. She paused, then added, Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the Department of Justice for investigation of civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and the murder of Lieutenant Ryan Shepard. Marcus sat stunned as fellow Marines around him stood at attention in a show of respect. Scout returned to his side-tail wagging as if he understood exactly what he had accomplished. Leila squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "It's over," she said. "You're free." "Because of Scout," Marcus replied, burying his face in his dog's fur. Judge Pearson had one final statement. "Sergeant Johnson, this court owes you an apology for the miscarriage of justice you have endured. Your race made you vulnerable to those who abused their power, but your honor and the loyalty of your remarkable dog revealed the truth. The system failed you, but today justice has prevailed." The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. General Shepard and Captain Westfield faced charges of murder conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The corruption investigation expanded to include defense contracts worth billions of dollars. Several senior officers who had participated in the cover-up were forced to resign. For Marcus, the changes were equally dramatic. He was reinstated to active duty with back pay and a promotion to staff sergeant. The Marine Corps issued a formal apology and launched a comprehensive review of racial bias in its military justice system. Most surprisingly, the new Marine Corps commandant personally asked Marcus to lead a task force on integrity in military justice. "We need someone who has experienced the system at its worst and maintained their honor throughout," the commandant explained. "Someone who can help us rebuild trust." For the first time in months, Marcus saw a path forward that honored both his service and his experience. 1 year later, the landscape of military justice had changed significantly. The Johnson-Shepard Act, named for both Marcus and the lieutenant, whose murder he was framed for, established new protections for service members, including independent review of evidence in capital cases and safeguards against command influence. Marcus, now heading the Military Justice Integrity Office, had moved into a small house near base with Scout. His PTSD, while not gone, had become manageable with proper treatment and Scout's continued support. More importantly, he had found purpose in ensuring that what happened to him wouldn't happen to others. Leila Rodriguez had been promoted to major and now taught military justice at the JAG school, where her course on bias in the military legal system had become mandatory for all new judge advocates. The most significant change, however, was in the military's approach to racial equity, now seen as essential to military readiness and integrity, rather than a peripheral diversity issue. On the anniversary of his release, Marcus stood at the dedication of the Shepard Whistleblower Protection Center, established to support service members who report misconduct. As he prepared to give his speech, he felt Scout press against his leg, a familiar, reassuring presence. Looking out at the gathered crowd, he saw faces from across the military community, officers and enlisted veterans and active duty people of all backgrounds, united in their commitment to a more just system. "A year ago, I was sentenced to death for a crime I didn't commit," Marcus began. "Today, I stand before you because a loyal dog refused to give up on his human and because good people refused to accept injustice. Sometimes the truth has 4 legs and a wagging tail." Scout barked once as if in agreement, and the crowd erupted in applause.